26th of February 2022, Perth signal box will be 60 years old. So I think it's time I get on with signalling the layout. Before I tell you more about how I'm going to model the signalling around Perth Station, I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about the real signalling at Perth. This is how the signal box looked originally. It changed its appearance just over 10 years ago when it received new double glazing and a new roof. The Perth signalling scheme was commissioned on the 26th of February 1962. Prior to that, the area of control was covered by 13 manual signal boxes, many of these, well, all of these dating back to Caledonian Railway times, and the Perth station area had many unusual and bespoke signalling arrangements. So there was a need to renew all this old signalling and cut out a lot of the duplication involved, and also there was a new marshalling yard planned for the north end of Perth, so it made sense to have a new signalling scheme. Perth was one of the first of the big re-signalling schemes in Scotland of the British Railways era. And although covering only 7 route miles, it included 167 work points and 470 separate routes. Sadly, with the closure of the engine sheds, the various goods yards, and a general rationalisation of the station area, the number of points has been reduced by about 2/3, although thankfully the main lines are all still in use. And the main junction area still has the original track and signalling as was installed 60 years ago, albeit many individual components have now been replaced or replaced several times over the years. So moving on to the model, what I intend to do is a series of shorter videos showing how I'm going about the signalling on my model railway layout. And I'll start with the 3 signals that you see as you walk onto the platform 2 from the main station building at Perth. And these are the signals at the end of platform 1, platform 3 and platform 4. All of these have route indicators, subsidiary shunt signals, and another non-standard nowadays form of mini yellow aspect, which was another form of shunting signal. Now I'm not going to be able to replicate every detail of these signals, but I want to produce something that's vaguely similar with a theta route indicator, a subsidiary shunt signal, and of course the main aspects. A key part of this layout, which I'll talk about more in future episodes, is that this is effectively a real signalling system. It works in the same way as a real signalling system. The signals go to a proceed aspect if the route ahead has been set and is clear. If the route is blocked in any way, then the signals will not go to amber, to yellow or green. In addition, if the route is set into one of the sets of sidings, or if it's a calling on aspect, then the shunt signal will illuminate rather than the main aspect. Again, I'll talk more about that in future videos. So the main components we're going to use to build the signals for Perth are first of all the Econ 3-aspect colour light signal kit ES60, and then for the route indicator, the Theta route indicator on top, we're using the Theta route indicator from Train Tech, And then for the subsidiary shunt signal, we're going to use again the Econ shunt signal, but we're only going to use the body from this, and we're going to replace the lights inside with nano LEDs from DCC Concepts. Now the reason for changing to the nano LEDs is that the original signal has light tubes inside it with connections below the bottom of the signal, so it's not really suitable for use in the way that I'm going to use it as a subsidiary signal attached to the signal post of the main signal. So in the plastic packet we have the LEDs, the signal head and the metal post along with a resistor, and the rest of the signal is on this plastic screw. So like most plastic kits, a sharp craft knife and we cut them out. The next stage, of course, is to clean up each item, taking off any remaining plastic connections to the sprue. So the main parts of the signal can all be put together just with a push fit, with a little help from a steel rule or some other hard surface to push the metal into the plastic because it's an interference fit. The upper platform can then be put on top. Finally, the signal head can be put in place. Oops. And as you can see, the main body of the signal's put together and it's ready to fit the LEDs. However, before we do this, I've taken out the parts from the Econ position light ground signal. We're actually only going to use the plastic unit from the signal, and so what we'll do first of all is remove the remaining plastic that we don't need. Again, we'll just clean up the edges of the plastic. Now, because this is a subsidiary shunt signal on a main aspect, it's only the two diagonal lights, and bear in mind this is reversed, so it's the two diagonal lights going to the right which will be illuminated. The bottom light here on the right hand side, it would be the left hand side looking at it face on, is going to be blank in this signal. If it was a ground position light signal it would show a red, but because this is a subsidiary signal that aspect is blanked off. So I've got a tiny piece of insulating tape and I'm just going to use that to cover over that particular lens of the signal. Now I've used black tack for this as well in the past, just that black tack's a bit messy, so we'll go with the masking tape this time. So the next stage is to install the nano LEDs. Now these are extremely tiny, you can just see them on the blade of my craft knife, maybe even clearer if I remove the craft knife. And one at a time I'm just going to install them into the appropriate lens, into the appropriate light position on the signal, and I'm just going to glue them in with a little super glue. Really glue the wires rather than the LED. So that's the top one. It really is quite finicky. Now we'll just let that go off and then we'll glue in the other one. So the LED's in, we'll just give it a little bit of glue. And I'm just going to put a little glue around the edge of the signal body. And we'll just glue the top on. Or the back rather. So that's the subsidiary signal prepared and ready to mount on the main signal post. So the next stage is to prepare the signal post, and we want to just position the subsidiary signal just below the main head. So we just get an idea of how much room we need there. And then what we're going to do is file a small flat area on the post of the signal. So the next stage is to take a pin chuck with a fine drill. I think this is about 0.3 of a millimetre, but something quite small. And then we'll just, using the flat we've created, drill into the post of the signal. So it doesn't take much. The post's made of aluminium, so it's fairly soft. That's us through, and then we can just open out the hole using the end of a file. Now the next stage is pretty finicky, and it involves passing the wires of the LEDs, the nano LEDs, down through the hole we've just created in this signal post. Now it is quite tricky. You do need quite a good magnifying glass to do this, so I'll film it as best I can. So just a case of putting the first pair into the hole, and then just using a pair of tweezers, feed in a little bit at a time. Now, once the wires come out at the bottom of the signal, of course, then you can pull them through. I'm only going to pull these so far because, of course, we've still got the other two to do, so pull them far enough so that they don't pull back out again, and we'll do the other two. So once we have the wires through the bottom, we can pull them through to make it a little bit easier. And before we fix the LED in place, you'll see I've tried to keep the two pairs of wires separate, and we'll just do a double check to make sure we know which is anode, which is cathode. A very simple way of checking it is I've got my trusty transformer here with a couple of resistors fitted. I think these are both 1 kilo ohm resistors, and so we'll just try the LED across the terminals, sort out which is positive, which is negative, and just mark them, mark the wires appropriately with a little bit of tape. So I'm just going to hold one wire in the cathode, one wire in the anode. You can see that one of the lights comes on. So I've got them the right way around. So this this one here is the cathode, so I'll mark that with a little piece of tape. The next stage in the build is to fit the Theta Indicator. Now this Traintech root Theta Indicator is only actually capable of showing one aspect. You have to decide what you want it to show before you build it and mask off the areas of the matrix panel, and those remaining will then show whichever letter or number you wish. Now in this case, this signal is going at the end of platform 1 and I want it to show an L for loop, so I'll mask off areas to leave an L showing through when the light's on. I've now masked off the back of the matrix panel and it now shows an L. So the next stage is to fit the wires. I'm using the same kind of wire that's fitted to all the Berco and Econ signals. It's a very fine 0.25 of a millimetre wire. And to strip this wire, you need a kind of specialised wire stripper. I use this device here, and the smallest actually strips is 0.25 of a millimetre. So for this, you just poke the wire through the end, press down and pull. Before soldering, I'll just clean up the solder tabs with a glass fibre brush to make the solder flow and adhere more readily. Have to be careful on this side because this is the side with the tiny LED on it. So I'm just using a little bit of blue tack just to hold the matrix in place at the moment. The cathode wire goes to the back of the panel, and this is the panel with the LED, so I'm being very careful not to damage the LED. And I'll just put a little bit of solder on and then fix the cathode wire. I've now fitted the wires through the base plate of the root indicator, and I can now fit the matrix panel and the base plate to the hood. Making sure I get into the right slots. And I'll just put a spot of glue on that to hold it together. Now this is the cover for the back of the signal, and we need to cut a hole in the top of the back cover to allow the wires from the Theta root indicator to pass down into the post. So here we are, I've just cleaned it up. In fact, I'm going to turn this back plate around and use the clean edge at the top to fit the Theta indicator to. And there we are, it's a nice close fit, and then it's just a case of applying again a little bit of glue. Next, we're going to feed the wires from the Theta indicator we're going to feed the wires from the theta indicator down through the signal post before we do any of the main aspects. So this is slightly easier this time because we're using the hole at the top of the post. We just push the wires down until they're coming out of the bottom. Next, we're going to fit the main aspect LEDs into the signal head. Remembering, of course, red in railway signals goes to the bottom. And the reason for that, interestingly, is it brings it more into the line of eye of the driver. And also, in severe weather situations, if there's snow, for instance, snow can sometimes build up in the lens hood of the signal, and of course the one at the bottom doesn't have a lens hood below it, so there's less likelihood of the red signal being blocked by snow. Red, of course, being the most important signal. So we're going to feed the wires down first into the post and then feed them into the holes in the signal head. And I'm just going to take them all together. Try and get them all in. Just gently push them down. The post is getting fairly congested inside, but it is capable of taking all these wires. Okay, and they're all coming out at the bottom, as you can see. So we'll just pop these LEDs into place, starting of course with red at the bottom. In fact, in some ways it's easier taking the head off to do this. So I'll just pull these wires down into place. So next we'll fit the theta indicator in place, and I'll just pull the wires down. Place the back cover over the head of the signal. So, with the back of the signal in place, holding the theta indicator, we can use a little bit glue again, just to hold that all in place. And we'll just hold it there for a moment and for the glue to go off. Finally, of course, we want to get the subsidiary shunt signal in place. So I'm just going to gently take the wires at the bottom and pull them through. Pull them down the post. Leave a little bit of slack at the top and just gently get this into position. We've got it in position in the signal, and then it's a case of some glue, of course. So I'm just going to hold it in place while the glue dries, just to make sure it sticks in its correct position. I've now soldered additional lengthened wires to all the wires coming out the bottom of the signal to make it easier to wire into the baseboard. Now, the signals are all controlled through an accessory decoder. And to make this operate, the main aspect of the signal, the main signal aspects, the main head with the red, yellow, green is grouped together. They've got a common, all the cathodes are joined together, and that will go to two accessory decoder addresses. The theta root indicator will go to an on-off separate decoder, a third decoder address. And finally, the shunt signal, again, the wires from that will go to a fourth decoder address. Now I've got a test rig set up here to test the signal, so we can cycle between red and green, and then yellow with the second decoder address back to green. A third decoder address has the theta root indicator, and then a fourth decoder address has the shunt signal. Now at the moment there's no connection between any of these aspects. That will come through the next stage, which will show how I actually operate the signal in practice in the layout. I hope you found that reasonably interesting, particularly if you're about to install some signalling in your own layout. In future videos, I'll look at how I control the signals and also the build of some of the other gantry signals and cantilever signals around Perth Station. In the meantime, we'll watch a few more trains pass through the station or leave the station, and these include a few new locomotives to the layout. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.